Welcome to the City Center Podcast. I'm Jerry Marcello. As cities like West Palm Beach continue to change and grow, it is a challenge to preserve its history. New structures wipe away the old, taking with them the memories of when this area was a small town in a largely undeveloped frontier. But there is a place where ties to our city's past live on, and strangely enough, it is where we remember our dead. Today, we'll explore Woodlawn Cemetery and why this place of eternal rest also serves as a link to West Palm Beach's rich history. Next on the City Center Podcast from West Palm Beach. And joining us today is Ginger Pedersen, who is a writer and historian who is also native to the area. Ginger, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
We're here to talk about history, and there's no one better I can imagine having this conversation with. West Palm Beach, even though we are about, 135 years or so old at this point, we have a very rich history. There's an amazing story between its birth through Henry Flagler and its growth, and a lot of amazing stories have taken place here. It's almost a shame that sometimes people who are moving here aren't even aware of some of the fantastic things that have happened here. You're a historian. Tell us what made you so interested in history and why West Palm Beach history is a focus for you.
I always loved history, even as a child. Growing up in Jupiter, I used to love to go to see the Du Bois family and some of their older members. They always had Pioneer coffee once a year in Jupiter, and I would drag my parents along to it, not the other way around. So I always had that penchant for history. Plus, my family had some deep history roots in Palm Beach County. My grandparents ran a tourist attraction in Boca Raton called Africa USA, which was kind of a early version of a lion country safari. There were no cages, so the animals, not carnivorous, were out and about, zebras and giraffe and wow. Elephants and things. So
well, let's touch on that just for a second here, because it's really zany. Now, it's not about West Palm Beach.
No.
But in Boca Raton, there was a lion country safari style animal thing?
Yeah, you would drive through on a little Jeep train that they took you in. You sat in one of the little wagons that was dragged behind a Jeep, and you would watch and you could interact somewhat with the animals even in that time. So, yeah, it was open in the 1950s.
No.
I never saw it personally, but I have heard all the stories from my cousins who grew up there.
Something new for our friends in South County. Y'all had a thing there that was a lot like, it's just insane.
It's very crazy.
The things we learn just by having conversations and talking about parts of the past that would never come up in normal conversation. You learn about the history, and I think that's part of what we're doing here, is rediscovering a very colorful past, not only here in West Palm Beach, but as far as the entire county is concerned. So much has happened here.
So much has happened, and I think people, especially who have come here and made this their home, don't realize that we do have a long history. So back in 2014, we wanted to capture part of that history in a book, saying, why not, the Legendary Locals is a series that's done by a book company, and we said, why not Legendary Locals of West Palm Beach? Mm-hmm. And it was through the research for the book that we found ourselves in Woodlawn one day, looking at where some of the people that we wrote about had been interred. So we said, why not do a tour of Woodlawn and tell these same stories that we tell in the book and tell different ones, and we're always finding something new. Even after 10 years, we discover new stories in Woodlawn. Something interests you in a tombstone, or you read something in a paper and you're like, I wonder if they're in Woodlawn, and sure enough they are. So, and there's very dark stories and there's very wonderful stories in Woodlawn. It was a point where a lot of people from the 1928 hurricane were buried in a mass grave because they had no choice. The disease threat was so great after that hurricane that they had to do something as terrible as that. So it's really quite amazing. Well,
we're going to talk a lot more about Woodlawn and the cemetery, but I know you were kind enough to bring along, the copy of the book that has you as one of the co-authors.
Yeah, so I've written quite a few books with Janet DeVries Naughton, and we do a lot of our research together, and we've done other writing. So It's always good to have someone to bounce ideas off of when you're writing and thinking of these things. So.
That's really great. I'm flipping through it for the first time, and it is packed with images, packed with tidbits. It is a treasure trove of information about local heroes.
Yeah, local heroes. And we had a couple of scoundrels we tucked into,
scoundrels.
because you always have, that's the part of the total community. But, the center point is West Palm Beach in the county. It always has been for such a long time, as its county seat when we became a county in 1909, that it's always been here, that things are centered in the county. This is where
If someone's
everything
interested in
comes.
getting a copy of this, where can they get it?
They can get it on Amazon.
Okay.
It's widely available. It's available in local bookstores as well.
And we'll show it on the screen. Legendary Locals of West Palm Beach is the
Correct.
title
Yeah,
of the
it's a
book.
West Palm Beach-based book.
All right, that's very good. And I understand that you have something else that you're working on. Just very quickly.
Yes,
before we
I
get to the
do.
cemeteries.
It's the story of Dr. Mabel Elliott, who was a physician following World War I in Turkey, Armenia, and Greece. And that family has very deep ties to West Palm Beach, especially because they had 14 children.
Wow.
And her father, Joseph Elliott, was the chairman of the committee that formed the town of West Palm Beach on November 5th, 1894. So you can't get much more West Palm Beach than that.
Absolutely.
So it's going to be a really incredible story of bravery and heroism that we don't necessarily associate many times with women, but everybody can be a hero.
And when will that book become available?
That'll be coming out in late summer, early fall.
Okay, so we'll keep an eye out for it too.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll be available on Amazon as well.
It'll be on Amazon and all the major booksellers.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the cemetery. And now, is Woodlawn the only cemetery in West Palm Beach, or are there others?
There are others. There's Hillcrest Cemetery up on Parker. That's a privately owned cemetery.
Okay.
But Woodlawn is the only public cemetery, I believe, in the city of West Palm Beach that is part of the city's Parks Department. And it was a gift from Henry Flagler. It originally belonged to Flagler. He had paid to have the layout of the cemetery way back in the late 1800s. And then that's when the burials began. Now, it's not West Palm Beach's first cemetery. There was a couple of small cemeteries in the Northwood area. There was one downtown, very, very briefly, at Clematis and what we would call Dixie today, what the pioneers would know as Poinsettia.
Oh,
That's
like right here where City Hall is.
Yeah, pretty much. A little bit. Yeah, it was basically here, and it was very few people interred because they knew it would be way too small. So then there was a much larger cemetery where the Norton Museum is located that was called Lakeside. And that was also privately owned by the Lake Worth Pioneer Association, which still exists. And they had hundreds of burials there. Most of the people were moved over to Woodlawn when the association decided to deed that property to the city because they didn't have the funds to maintain it.
Gotcha.
There are still people interred under the Norton,
I was
at
gonna
least
ask you about
40.
that. Wow.
There are also a few tombstones in a crawl space under the Norton. So, whether the place is haunted, I mean, some people think it is. I'm not, I always stress to people, we're not doing a ghost tour.
No.
This is a very dignified storytelling tour of the people that are there in Woodlawn. So we've had ghost hunters on our tours, but that's not the focus of what we do.
Yeah, and I think that's completely valid. I mean, it's a lot of fun to tell the ghost stories and to, and it gets to be Halloween time and you go out and do stuff.
Sure.
But you know what? The real value of what you provide and the memorial quality of the cemetery is, again, a reminder of the lives that were lived here in West Palm Beach and the people who came here as pioneers or as early residents, and looking back at their lives and how life was for them and how radically different it is for us today it's like a history book. You open it up and you can learn so much. I had the opportunity to go on the tour that you're describing just recently. And what I discovered, what was so special for me, was instead of saying, okay, well, here is this location or here is this marker, a lot of the stories you told were very personal and about people at different moments in the city's history and how they lived and what happened to them. And it really brought it to life.
Yeah, and I think that's really what we did. I mean, I always think as humans the thing that makes us to me, different than any other creatures is we tell stories. It is the basis of so much of what we do. And I tell people, if you want to be remembered, tell your story. Tell your story to someone, because everybody has a great story and they just don't know it.
And I know I was surprised to learn that we had some fairly fairly old markers in the cemetery. I believe one of the very first stops we stopped, we were looking at a veteran that was alive during the Civil War or active during the Civil War. That's, you don't think of West Palm Beach, you think 50s, you think 40s. You don't jump all the way back into the 1890s.
Yeah, and there are several people from that time period, and in people born as early. I've never seen a 1700s, but there are several like 1810, 1812 people that were born at that time that are interred at Woodlawn.
That's amazing. And so, once again, you mentioned that I think I used the term that there are many heroes located there. You said that there could possibly be villains. What sort of villains could we possibly have in that cemetery?
Well, there are villains, and there's tragic stories, and there are empty graves, the most famous of which belongs to Judge Chillingworth and his wife. There's a very nice headstone there, and I always tell people this is an empty grave because their bodies were never recovered after they were killed by basically hitmen who drowned them somewhere out in the ocean. So those kinds of tragedies, but villains, if you want to call them that, someone who was kind of someone who killed someone, like Lena Clark, the murdering postmistress of West Palm Beach, who served time in a insane asylum for 2 years.
Goodness.
But she came out after 2 years after killing a man and stealing $32,000 of government money. So it's all of those kinds of twists and turns and crazy tales that you stumble across one day that I've never gone looking for a story that I found. It somehow just bounces into me. And in the strangest ways, with Lena Clark, my parents' first house was on Lake Clark. So I was curious. I'm like, oh, I wonder who Lake Clark is named after. So I Googled Clark. And her story was like the third link, girl murderer. I'm like, what is this about? So that's how sometimes things happen. With the Elliott book, it was somebody put something on Facebook about her, and I was like, oh, I've never heard of her. How did that happen? So it's very strange how things like that happen. And even with Bird Spillman Dewey, that we wrote a book about pioneering Palm Beach, which was a true West Palm Beach story about a woman who was a writer, had founded the town of Boynton, and had this beautiful estate called Ben Trovato. Well, one day someone emails me and said, I think they're theming a hotel around your book. I'm like, what? And she's like, it's the Ben. And so the Ben Hotel is about Bird Spillman Dewey and her dogs, and there's a copy of her book in every room. And I was like, well, I never saw that coming. And they really wanted, I said, why did you guys pick that? The designers of the hotel, they said they wanted something that was uniquely West Palm Beach, not Flagler, something that was just Palm Beach. And they stumbled across her. So I think it's important because West Palm Beach has always had a little bit of a little brother syndrome. And it was always the service town to Palm Beach and all these kind of little bit derogatory redheaded stepchild. And it's not. It's a wonderful city. And it is, like you said, it has evolved in time. It is evolving again, and it will evolve 100 years from now.
Certainly. When
we're all gone. It's just the way things are. I call it the layers of history. But I like to respect what was, because I think it's interesting. I don't want those people to be forgotten no more than we want to be forgotten.
No, we'd be losing color. We'd be losing part of the fabric that makes this community so interesting and so different. And it's important that we have the ability to capture this through your writings and the folks that you work with who are also involved with history and reclaiming the history that would otherwise be lost. And so it's really, really very valuable and really, really great. Again, we talked about heroes and people who had less than heroic histories. And I know that the Judge Chillingworth story that you mentioned is astoundingly. I mean, why it's not a major movie somewhere that we've.
I've never figured that out. They've done 2 documentaries,
Yeah.
both, national productions, but the fact that it's never been even written as a novel. They
Yeah.
did the podcast on it, which was like 12 parts, and they did a nice job on that. But to me, there's, it's a very disturbing story for
Sure.
so many reasons.
It is a very disturbing story, and I challenge folks who are listening to this, if you don't know about the story of the Chillingsworth, it's spelled like it sounds, go ahead and start Googling it, find out more about it. It is absolutely breathtaking, the story that happened here in the 50s that took place.
Yeah, it's very disturbing.
is.
And they did an incredible job of what they had in the podcast of finding the original tapes that they did and really giving some of the details of the story.
There you are.
Very striking.
Another part, even though it's a very dark part of West Palm Beach history, it is an amazing bit of color, and it's a stunning story to get a hold of. But we're talking about the cemetery. Now, you are clearly expert in the people that are there and the history of the folks who are part of the cemetery. Is there anything that is a standout to you, something that you find inspirational that you'd like to share as far as one of the people that are interred there?
Inspirational. I've always been very taken with Guy Metcalf because he was a character and a half. And really believed so much in our area. He was instrumental in having the county formed. He was postmaster of West Palm Beach. He was school superintendent for the town. Ran a newspaper that captured so much of the beautiful early history of West Palm Beach and the whole area. And so many people know nothing about him. He ended tragically, too, by suicide. But his story kind of stopped so abruptly that I don't think, and I've tried so many times to reach out to his family because I volunteer at the Historical Society. They have almost nothing on him. Literally one photograph and then one photograph taken from the newspaper. That's it.
Wow.
And so, he was such a colorful character. His story, because it just ends like so abruptly with him that I just thought, there could be more about him somehow.
Sure.
But so he's always been one of my heroes for early county history.
That's really, really neat. So I'm sure there's a lot of people who are now interested in taking part in one of the tours. Is that something that people can, where can they reach out to find out more about the availability?
So we do the tours we do them October and November. And then we do January, February, March, and April, because then we hit the summer and we hit mosquitoes and rain and all thunder and lightning. So it just became, we couldn't do them.
Sure.
So if they reach out to the Palm Beach County Parks, the West Palm Beach Parks Department, they have their Facebook page, and we also have a Woodlawn Cemetery Facebook page with the information. It's a very easy sign up. It's free. We just do reservations through a system called Eventbrite. Only because we don't want too many people. The first time we did the tour, we didn't have any reservations, and 150 people showed up. And it was way too many because we can't accommodate that many. It's too hard to move a group. We usually have between 40 and 60. That's a good number. And so they open up reservations, not for the whole season, but 1 month at a time. So right now, as this is being taped in February, the March reservations are open. So we still have March and April to do for this year.
So if to take part, the suggestion would be, first of all, go check on Facebook and see the group that's involved.
Yeah,
with
it's called Woodlawn Cemetery Tours, and it's there as a Facebook page, or just simply go to the West Palm Beach Parks Department website, and they have the link to the Eventbrite sign up, which is free. You don't have to put in any kind of credit card or anything like that. It's just a crowd control system.
Sure. And for people listening, the city website is WPB.org. You can go ahead and there's easy navigation to find your way to the park section, and you'll see information that will help you there. So that's terrific. We have an opportunity, a couple different ways for people to get involved, and that's really, really neat. Now, I understand that you are a volunteer, right?
Yes.
So, and that's terrific, and thank you for doing what you're doing. It's interesting because I think you're one of the very first people we've had on our program that wasn't actually a city employee. So, congratulations.
A volunteer, yeah.
How is it being a volunteer?
I love volunteering. I think it's giving back to our community is a way that we don't really consider. People may not like the way the country's going or whatever. And the first thing I say to someone like that, what do you do locally? Do you work at a shelter? Do you go to a retirement home and talk to lonely old people? I'm like, what do you do? And invariably what I hear is they don't do anything except be angry at the world. And I'm like, do something small. Go work at sort food at the I can't think of the name of what they call that place.
Yeah.
The food banks. You're going to go to a food bank. Go to your church. Find a way to contribute something to your community. My way of doing it is by sharing history and stories and writing and volunteering at the Historical Society of Palm Beach County. Those are ways that I try to give back to, and also what I like to do. I mean, you're not going to volunteer in something that you don't like to do typically.
Well,
we've done cleanings in Woodlawn, which are there. I think there's one coming up where they supply the chemicals and things to wash the headstones. And we usually get help from Palm Beach Atlantic University. FP&L has come out and their employees. So those are great events also to learn about those, because those headstones need care.
Sure.
Some of them they get, with our Florida weather, they get mildewy and stained, and so they have special chemicals that are just made for that are very gentle, that will actually help the headstones look a lot nicer and last longer.
Well, that's fantastic, and we encourage everybody to get involved.
Yes.
Volunteer, as you pointed out, is the backbone of many things in our community and a great way to give back to the place that you live. So that's fantastic. And I want to give a shout out. You've mentioned a couple of times the Palm Beach County Historical Society. Can you tell us a little bit about them?
The Historical Society of Palm Beach County has been around a very, very long time, since the 1930s. Judge James Knott was one of the key players in getting it started, and right now they're located in the 1916 courthouse. That's where they have their archives, what I call the secret chamber of magic, where all of the wonderful documents and photographs are stored. They also have a facility off-site where they store a lot of the larger artifacts, and it's an incredible collection. And every time I go there, somebody, I see someone bring in the shoebox or the photo album or whatever they have to contribute. Because I tell people, if you have things like old photographs and artifacts that are of historical value that tie to our area, bring them there, and they will see and assess your collection to see if it fits their needs. And it's a place to store things that are not going to end up in the garbage when something happens to you. People who have old letters or things that you may not think have value, of great historical value. That's with the Elliott family. I'd found some family letters that I was allowed to see, and I told them, I'm like, please donate these to an archive.
Sure.
Because for Mrs. Dewey, when I finally tracked down her family, I said, who has all her papers? Who has all her effects? Oh, they were all lost in a 1948 house fire.
Oh.
So I was like, I found them, but I didn't find them.
Oh.
So I often think it's like if she had left some things.
Sure.
I mean, we're not talking about cleaning out your garage, but things that are really photographs don't take that much room to give. And sometimes we get donations that solve mysteries, like somebody is standing in front of a house that we've been trying to figure out where that house was or what it looked like, and that's really the thing of the interest, is not necessarily the person, but maybe it's the house or the street.
Yeah.
So they can solve so many mysteries like that.
Sure. I mean, what you're describing is so important, especially in a dynamic, changing town like West Palm Beach. The city is reinventing itself generation by generation, and it's important for us to do exactly what you're describing, reaching back and grabbing a hold of those artifacts and those memories and preserving them for future generations so that we remember where we've been as opposed to just where we're going.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some aerial photos and photos taken from tall buildings in West Palm Beach kind of looking out in the 50s and 60s. And it really takes my breath away because so much has been lost to development and to high rises and things where there were simple, beautiful white cottages that just aren't that big of a part of the city anymore.
No.
But it's evolution, and I get that. Or even Flagler Drive, people don't know that was all filled in. in the early times when you went south of the city, all of their yards went straight into Lake Worth.
Like a little beach.
It was like a little beach, and it was the time of coconut palms. It really looked like Tahiti. And then we had lethal yellowing in the 1970s, which was a coconut disease that killed so many of the very old, tall Jamaican coconuts. And now we have the shorter coconuts, and it looks nice again, but those things towered over everything. But they unfortunately all died of that terrible disease that hit the coconuts.
We're in a changing community, and what you're doing to preserve the past and to capture it so that we have it to share and to learn from is so valuable and so important. So, we thank you for everything that you're doing and creating these documents and creating these books so that there's always a way for us to reach back to the past and remember where our city came from.
Yes, that's so important. And West Palm Beach has a very little special place in my heart. So it's really, like I said, it becomes the focal point of so much of what I do.
Ginger, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Remember, programs like the Woodlawn Cemetery Tour can only happen with the help of volunteers. There are many opportunities for volunteers to get involved in city programs. You can learn more by visiting the city's website at WPB.org or call 561-804-4906. The City Center podcast is a production of the City of West Palm Beach Department of Communications. I'm Jerry Marcello. We'll see you soon.